end of the year science video. So our first question is, what is a misconception? And a misconception related to science is when a student fails to learn new ideas because the material being taught isn't what they want to learn, or they already have a bad experience with what's being learned, so they don't want to learn more about it. So some common misconceptions found in science include classification, cells, density, light, and the seasons. And when we talk about those classifications, students believe that trees are only considered plants when they are small, but truly trees are plants. So we'll dive more into that and why they are considered plants. Another is about humans not being animals, but we are when we look at our similarities between the two. We are also considered animals. With cells, it is common to see students mislabeling cells and molecules because they're so small, but in reality they are very different. Cells make up our human body, molecules make up our desks and our things like that. Density is commonly confused with weight. They are categorized by students to be similar, but in fact they're different. Density is very different than weight. You have to calculate the density, and then from there maybe you can find the weight, but usually they're two different things that you have to find. Light is usually misconcepted by light, white light being colorless and pure, when in fact it's actually a light color and it's not clear. White is a color, can't be clear. Earth is closer to the sun in the summer and farther away from the sun in the winter when we're talking about seasons. But in fact, the Earth never moves from its orbit, and it just happens to face the sun differently in the winter, and it faces differently in the summer. That's why we have hot and cold. So we'd explore more into that. These all are things that we can explore and then figure out why they're called misconceptions. And then you experiment, find it, and then students will learn. So it's more hands-on than anything. So to explain more of the leverage, I would try and do a little bit of teaching, but honestly I want them to be student learned. So I want them to be able to take the experiment that they need to do, find every answer for each question by themselves or within a partner, and have me just be there to make sure that they're staying on track. I don't want to teach them this so that's all they're learning is by lecturing. I want them to experience why we're learning it, and they will be able to then enjoy science more. To talk about the progressions of standards, according to the next generation science standards, it helps increase the learning of the students in K through 12 education with these standards. So we want to make sure that they target each standard before they move on. So when you look into the disciplinary core idea progression, we look at each appendices, and each progression is summarized for each grade level. So that's what they need to learn before moving on to another grade level. So if we look at the first Earth Space Science progression, which is ESS 1A, K2 will know the patterns of movement of the sun, moon, and stars as seen from Earth and can be observed, described, and predicted. 3 through 5 will know the star ranges greatly in size and distance from Earth, and this can explain why each one is brighter than the other. 6 through 8 will not have anything in their standard to know because they've already touched on it, and I don't believe that they will be learning about it while they go through. And 9 through 12 would know the light spectra from stars are used to determine the characteristics, processes, and life cycles. So solar activity creates the elements through nuclear fusion. The development of technologies has provided the astronomical data that provides the empirical evidence for the Big Bang Theory. So each grade will touch on these, we'll go back, and then we'll move forward, and they'll know everything from there. If I was a 5th grade teacher focusing on the standard 5 PS13, that standard is to make observations and measurements to identify materials based on their properties. So they will need to have an understanding of matter from previous teachers. So we might touch base on that a little bit beforehand, kind of a review, so we know where we're at, if they actually grabbed it or not. So then if we need to, we can do more review on that. And then when they move on, they should have an understanding that matter exists as different substances that have observable different properties suited for different purposes. So they should know that matter exists but in different things and need to know why that is. They should also be prepared to learn how matter works and what makes matter, well, what matter is. They will have an understanding that matter is made up of particles that cannot be seen, and we can measure how matter makes up certain materials. So it's going to be more hands-on than anything, because they need to know the differences, and it's easier to explain when they're learning than by me lecturing. So I know that they're understanding, so then they can move on and be prepared for next time. The 5E learning cycle. Explain the desired outcome of each E. So when you plan these wonderful science lessons, which I had so much fun doing this past semester, you always have to start with the first E, which is engagement. So we want to make sure that they're engaged. This is when we would do like an open-minded question, so a divergent question, so they can get their brains thinking about why we need to learn this. I took an example from when we did our group science teach, when we talked about animals and their external structures that protect them in their climates or help them survive. So we gave them a question, had them write down the answer on a note card, and then we had them refer back to that note card later. So it's not like we just stopped it and it just was there. We tied it into our lesson, and then we were able to go back to it. So that's something you would want to do, is you want to go back. Then we would focus on the second E, which is the engagement, which is the activity. This is what we want them to be doing. Student-led more than teacher-student-led. I lost my place. So we did something small with ours, which was a graphic organizer as our example. Like, we had them research the animal that they were given, and then from there they were able to build the animal using materials and like their climates. So we want them to do something like that, or you can do something like having a small test before you build a structure. So you want them to build sand around their flag and see how that would fall down, like what would you need to like protect your straw. So then you would learn how to cooperate with your students, and then your students will be able to cooperate with each other, and then they'll learn from each other, ask questions together, and then all of that. There really shouldn't be no complications when you perform the activities. Maybe some a little like experimental problems, but students should be able to grasp it pretty easily. So then we go on to our third E, which is explanation, and basically how do we get to this conclusion based on our question. They will be able to show off what they did. They'll be able to explain why they took the way they did. Then we can talk about why each person's was different. Not everyone was going to have the same kind of way to get to their answer. So we want to see, oh, maybe this will be a better way to do it next time, or maybe, oh, that was a fun way, maybe I'll do that next time. It's kind of that thing where they get to just explain it and you get to see how they did it. And then we go into our elaboration, which is like the ending portion of our lesson. This can end with just a big discussion, a small discussion, or even creating a flip grid of what they've learned and how they are able to connect it to their real life. We did a flip grid where we connected water erosion to ourselves, and we went outside and we just found different erosion happening, and we were able to explain why this could affect us. So it was easier for us to understand why erosion is very important to learn about, and then that it's everywhere, so we need to learn about it. And the last one, we got there, is evaluation. So that's what the teacher will be looking for. We want to basically learn their cognitive learning objective. Did they understand the material being taught? Can you give them full points for what they did? Every student will be able to master the lesson being taught, so you want to make sure that you are getting that evaluated perfectly. And then onto our engineering practices. The engineering design process has 5 different steps. Our first step is asking. So we ask the question, how can we solve this problem? What constraints do you have when you solve this problem? How can others approach this problem? Then you move on to your imagination, which is your brainstorming. So this is where they get to be able to work in partners or groups to come up with ideas to try out onto their, as I was saying. We would be able to brainstorm, and then from there we would go into planning it out. So then we would be able to draw out what they believe is going to happen with their experiment that they brainstormed. Then they'll also list their materials they will need to perform their experiment. And then they're able to create what they want to do. So they want to follow this plan that they made in the second step and the third step. It's okay to fail on the first try for them. They're going to retest it. That's why I want them to create several of them so they can go back and keep retesting and even performing better on their what they designed. Then they get to improve what was the best part of their design, what can they fix in their design, how can we redesign it, try it out, keep retesting, and if it did work the first time, go back. And then the deep learning will be working out in the, I believe, creating portion of their engineered design process, because they're able to build with materials. Then they can see if it's going to work, and then they can redesign it from there. They don't have to test it out then. They can be like, oh, this doesn't work, so maybe let's go a different route, and then they'll be able to play out that idea that they had in their head, and that's where I believe deep learning works. And to end it all, I really enjoyed the class. I'm really sad I missed the last day, but due to sickness, it was awful. I had really a lot of fun. I enjoyed all of the experiments we did. I think the one thing that was really hard was our mastering poster. I feel like that could have gone a lot better. Maybe instead of doing like groups of 2, maybe groups of 3 or 4. So then we wouldn't have that malfunction that we had, and it'll be easier process. But other than that, I really enjoyed the class. There's nothing I don't think would have been bad, in a sense that you couldn't teach it next semester, because everything I learned helped me, and I actually did really well this semester. So thanks, James. But other than that, I really enjoyed the class, and I wish I could take it again, but unfortunately I can't. So yeah. Thanks for a great semester, happy holidays, and that's about it.